Well, welcome everyone today into our Divorce Disruptor webinar. I'd like to say it is the session that's being recorded. So if some of you were not able to make it, you have a chance to join us on the recording. The seminar webinar was designed really in mind with individuals that are maybe entering the process in the middle of it and really want some clarity from that. I've been through a divorce myself, and I've done numerous divorces, and a lot of the content that I've brought to you really with the mind of give you a little bit of that realistic concept so you can start formulating your strategy to lead you to a better outcome, not to have, a system to take you through it, but really be more the person that's more knowledgeable and can pick and choose what's best for them. So without further ado, I'm gonna have Jenny to go next, but I want to introduce myself a little bit. Tatiana Sunik. I'm a CDFA. I'm also a wealth advisor. I've been in wealth management for about 22 years now. I've gotten divorced about 11 years ago and really wanted to understand the process better because I saw a lot of demand for that education piece and that financial literacy and really have more strategy around divorce financials because lawyers are really more of a concept individuals and financial side is not always their strength, especially when it comes to more sophisticated and higher net worth, more complex divorces. So I start from helping a lot of my friends and friends of our friends and really just organically got into the space. I help my clients to go through the process, but really where my passion is to set you up with your next chapter because there's a lot of unknown and it's a lot of things you probably have to do that you've never done before because maybe another spouse really took control of the finances in the past. So I really help you to get into that unknown in the more sophisticated, more confident way and do a lot of financial planning and modeling. And I strongly believe financial planning for your life is very important now that you're going to go on your own. And it doesn't start at the end of the divorce when you pick up the pieces. It really starts during a divorce when you still have a control and you have still impact on what you're doing in negotiating. So with that said, I'm going to pass this to Jenny.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you to all of you who are here with us live today. I'm sure we'll have people jumping in and out over the next hour. And to everyone watching this on your own time, my name is Jenny Shane. If you're unfamiliar with me, I am a divorce coach. My background is as an attorney. I practiced law for many years, and then I was certified as a family mediator. I am here in South Florida, and although my licenses and all are specific to Florida, divorce crosses all state lines and they all have common themes, common laws, and really everything is pretty much the same from state to state, minus some small nuances here and there. So with my background as an attorney, as well as still a practicing family mediator, I recognize very quickly, being a mediator 10 plus years ago, that there is a void of education for people going through divorce who are entering this new process, but maybe never dealt with the legal field to begin with, and now also experiencing a very traumatic family personal matter. So I decided I needed to get into the same space, but in a different way to help educate people on what divorce looks like from the legal side and understanding and understanding that you do need to be strategic. Do not go into divorce blind. Do not go into divorce, hire an attorney and hand everything over to someone you don't really know to plan the rest of your family dynamic going forward after divorce. It's really important to stay educated, to be involved in the process, and to be a huge decision maker in what your divorce looks like. And so with that, I've jumped into this world of coaching now for 5 years. And I love this space because I feel that by working with someone, especially at the beginning of divorce, I'm able to empower them and give them the knowledge, as Tatiana said, give them the knowledge and the confidence to be able to go through the divorce, feeling actively involved and a decision maker, and knowing that their next chapter is going to be a good one. They're set up for success because they were strategic and they planned the entire time. So that's how I work with my clients now, is as a coach, not practicing law, not necessarily doing much mediation, but really focusing on the strategy of divorce. Okay, Tatiana, let's jump into it. Oh, and also I just want to say to everyone who is attending with us live, if you have any questions that either you came to the webinar with or any questions that come up while we're speaking, go ahead and throw them in the chat. And at the end of the presentation, Tatiana and I will do a question and answer with any questions that you guys pose, as well as anything that we know is also going to be relevant for you all. Okay.
And with that said, I also like to say, as a disclaimer, this is for information purposes only.
Yes.
This is not a legal advice nor a financial advice. Every situation is specific. So please seek out a professional that is specific to your circumstances to get that advice that would be more suitable for you. This is just the information purposes and some education.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Okay, so the number one part of all of divorce really stems from a lot of misconceptions. Unfortunately, if you've never experienced divorce, worked in the field, your knowledge comes from the universe around us, right? It comes from social media, it comes from your neighbors, it comes from family members. And there is a lot of misconception around what divorce looks like, how it should be handled, what the outcome may look like. That being said, this statistic is coming from the highest level of board certification for divorce attorneys, and that's the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, which is 95% of divorces settle without trial. And I think that's really important to know because many people who are starting divorce are very fearful of the process. Just to be in the legal world itself is very overwhelming if this is your first time. So it's important to know that you're not automatically on the track all the way to trial in front of a judge and that scary idea of a courtroom. That is such a small percentage of divorce cases that actually end up in trial. Most of them will either settle early, settle somewhere middle of the road when they get to mediation, or they will settle right before trial. So you may go all the way to the end, but never actually get to trial. So keep that in mind as you're going through this process. And that also is to help you create a mindset to be more settlement focused, right? Even if it's a high conflict divorce, you can still be very settlement focused. The second thing, court does not have to be your, oh, go back to that first slide, Tatiana, sorry. Court does not have to be an automatic path that you take. There are other paths of divorce. And I think people don't know that. And that's another major misconception out there is that you're divorcing. Okay, we're going to go the route that I see on TV and that I hear about, which is lawyers and down towards court. Major misconception. Some other common misconceptions that come up for people going through divorce who are a bit unfamiliar could be that mothers are always winning custody. Mothers get primary custody. Fathers get that every other weekend, maybe one day during the week. That's an old school mentality. That is not what is supported by the law in pretty much all the states. It could be an outcome, but it is not a mandatory, that's what's happening. Another is the idea of alimony. Everyone walks into a divorce saying, I'm getting alimony. My spouse earned more money than me. I know I'm going to get it. Whether that's right or not is not necessarily the answer here, but it's the wrong thought process to have. You can't go in with these expectations because you will set yourself up for failure. Another can be that, you're in a divorce and an emergency motion comes up, which you think is an emergency, like maybe it has to do with changing time sharing, and that you're going to get in before a judge right away because you're upset and the judge is going to hear you. Unfortunately, that's not correct. Unless it's potentially a life or death situation, you probably won't see the inside of a courtroom, whether it's really inside or on Zoom, for weeks. And then lastly, another major misconception, and everyone, I know you're on Instagram and on Facebook and looking for divorce information. And I see these posts all the time, which say, you need a shark. I need a bulldog. I need the meanest, baddest, strongest divorce attorney out there. Then that is going to equate to the best outcome in your divorce. And unfortunately, that is a huge misconception. Could you need that type of attorney? Yes, but not because that will equal a better outcome. You may need that type of attorney because of personalities involved. Okay, on to the next, Tatiana. Okay, this is the next major issue that comes up with divorce is this idea of entitlement, that you believe I'm supposed to get X, Y, and Z. I know that my neighbor got alimony. My sister-in-law got primary parent responsibilities. Whatever it may be, if you come into divorce with an entitlement belief, you are setting yourself up for failure also. And really, that entitlement comes from a place of miseducation or lack of education, just not having any, because this is a new place that you've now entered, the world of divorce, and you don't really know what to think. So you kind of start going down the rabbit hole of social media, asking friends and family who've been divorced, and taking that feedback you get and assuming that will apply to your case. And unfortunately, that is not the way to go about divorce. You need to really get information for your case, your family, because every single divorce is different and unique. Even if it seems like the same, I've never seen one that is copy and paste ever. Also important to understand the rules of your state. Every state is different. Every state has different laws and statutes that have been passed, that if you don't familiarize yourself with that, you may have this entitlement that you are bound to get permanent alimony for the rest of your life. But that might not be how your state views alimony anymore. I know here in Florida, recently, as of July 2023, the idea of permanent alimony went away. And if you didn't know that and you're now entering a divorce, assuming you've been in a 20+ year marriage, you're setting yourself up for failure, because that is no longer the standard that is used. Okay, another one going on is clients focusing on what they want and really not thinking about what they are entitled to based on the law and based on the dynamics of your case. If you lead with "I want," chances are not going to get what you want. You may fall in that 5% towards trial because you become inflexible and you're not seeing the big picture here. So it's really important, and really what I do with all of my clients is focus on strategy, understanding that you can be involved, really get your hands dirty in the divorce, and shifting the way you think about it from not being reactive, but proactive. And proactive in a divorce means planning, means preparing yourself, doing homework, doing the settlement options, thinking of ways to properly communicate with your soon-to-be ex, with your lawyer, all the other parties involved. If you can't shift your mindset to being more proactive and only reactive, then chances are going to drag your divorce for many, many months, years, and multiple retainers with your attorney. Okay. And Tatiana, just to drag you into this conversation for a quick second, you're seeing all of this, everything I'm saying, but from a financial lens, right? So when you have a client who is going through divorce and they're only, coming in with this entitlement attitude, what is one quick thing that you can say to a client from the financial side of things to get them to have that mind shift?
I really like to understand first kind of where is this entitlement coming from, right? If they came into the money, if they are already accumulated that nest egg. And then second is, one thing what you're entitled to is remembering enforcing that entitlement and proving this is a very long journey. So I would like you to be more educated about what are you trying to be entitled to, and understand your net worth and your income. That's your foundation. And then we have conversations and get reality checks, and get to a place where we perhaps demystify a lot of that, get rid of that fog, and sometimes people really rethink their approach and even communication with their spouse during negotiations.
That's great. And I love that you said reality check, because I'm definitely going to bring that up later in some other slides. And that is a big part of working with a coach, is having someone who is going to give you that reality check, who's going to keep you accountable during this process. So when you're carrying that entitlement mindset, this neutral third party comes in and says, well, why? Why do you feel that way? Because by maintaining that, you're just dragging this on. You're not opening yourself up to be more settlement focused so you can end this. We don't want you to be in a divorce indefinitely. We want to find that exit door and get out in a way that you're set up for the future, right? So all about reality checks, planning, strategy. So this next slide is starting to shift our conversation into the different paths of divorce.
Right.
And this main path is going to deal with an amicable divorce. So when you're looking at this slide, keep in mind, it's not necessarily in an order. It's just, these are some major to-dos that happen when you're in an amicable divorce. And when I say amicable divorce, I mean one where both parties agree to go through it together, possibly without lawyers. They say, we're going to do this on our own. They're going to maybe go get lawyer consults. They're going to know what their rights are. Chances are they're going to hire a mediator, sit with a mediator, and let the mediator really guide them and facilitate all the settlement conversation, sharing their financial documents back and forth. This is something I do also as a family mediator. I guide both parties to do their own financial disclosures on their own, bring all the documents to the mediation. So it's an open book. You want to see my statements? Here are my car payments. Here's everything, right? And so those two people are able to really move through the divorce in a very open way. They are settlement focused. They may not like each other. And that's a big part of this is the emotional part is I will tell people, you don't have to like one another, but what you do have to do is be able to sit down at a table and have conversation. That's all that's needed to be able to reach settlement. You can keep emotions out of it and focus on the meat of the divorce of what truly needs to be divided. Okay, let's move on.
So that's the amicable, right, part.
Correct. Okay, this next visual for you, the next two actually are the opposite, are going to be when we talk about a high conflict divorce, right? This one specifically is high conflict with regards to financials. And in that, you're starting at the bottom of this visual and working your way up. Usually what winds up happening is you hire a lawyer. High conflict divorce for most people means I need a lawyer right away. I can't do this on my own. I need my guard dog to step in and guide me through this process. Most attorneys, though, are stepping in and just doing the legal stuff. They are not necessarily helping you with the strategy, the homework, the planning, the getting yourself set up for the future financially with your children, whatever it may be. And they're also not providing the emotional support. They are there to handle the legal work. That's it. And I think, unfortunately, many people who hire an attorney rely on their attorney for all those other things I just said and get upset when they don't get that support from their attorney. And the real response to that is not what your attorney is trained to do. That is not the type of work your attorney wants to do. Your attorney wants to handle the legal stuff, which includes communicating with the opposing party, filing motions, going to hearings, drafting papers, drafting settlement, that type of work. They're not there to say, mediation's coming up. Now let's go through everything and really start coming up with all these different strategies. That's not going to happen with your lawyer. It's very few and far between when that happens. Maybe you'll have a 30-minute, maybe at max an hour meeting with your attorney leading to mediation to generally discuss things, but chances are you're not going to go in deep with your attorney. And then again, it works its way down this path. You may need to bring in other professionals such as Tatiana to focus on the financials of the divorce. You may even need to take it a step further and get a forensic accountant involved. So this path is one that's long and windy. And as it shows at the top, high fees, because that is something that is going to be dragged on for a long time. And your attorney is going to go through all the stages of a divorce, discovery, mediation, trial prep, and that's going to be multiple retainers. So this visual, again, pretty much the same, so I'm not going to go through it all the way. This is a high conflict with custody, though, as the issue, not so much the financial piece. And again, bringing your attorney, letting your attorney really lead you through the process, and then probably bringing in other professionals that deal with custody to help you get to the end, whether it's a decision by the judge or you do eventually get to mediation or settlement.
And sometimes this could be a combination of both, right? Financials and custody.
So yes,
like I said,
absolutely. I have seen both.
Yeah.
Yeah, and typically, Tatiana, in a high conflict divorce, if there are children involved, you're having high conflict on everything. everything, because the parties cannot communicate. So if they can't communicate, how are they going to make agreements as to custody, financials, every piece involved in the divorce? So basically take those roadmaps and blend them. Okay, so this next slide is really, I tell my clients two things. There are two parts of divorce, and this one is good because it just showed the third, how they overlap. You have the overall legal part of the divorce, and then you have the emotional part of the divorce. And they're both present and they're both equal in value. But the problem is the emotional part of the divorce should not blend into the legal part of the divorce, because when that happens, you lose sight of settlement. And instead, it becomes more of a fight mentality of how do I win? How do I get my entitlement? Falling into those misconceptions. And then that means longer divorce, more attorney's fees spent, right? So if you can keep these two parts separate and you where they overlap, you bring in neutral parties such as a coach, such as a certified divorce financial analyst, someone who can help you zoom out and focus on it from a more strategic lens to see, okay, what are the true realities of what we're working with here? What are the ways I can settle? What are the things I must have? What are the things I don't need to have? Right. And also to give you that additional emotional support that you're not getting from your lawyer. Right. I have a lot of my clients, Tatiana, who like to vent to me, right? They have the ability to communicate with me every day, and they understand, and I've made it very clear to my clients, don't waste your attorney's time and don't waste your retainer fee complaining about your co-parent. Use me. Let me be that person. I don't charge the way attorneys do, right? And so I also give you neutral feedback. I'm going to tell you when you need to chill out and when you need to let things go, or when you need to have boundaries in these type of situations. So it's really important to not allow your emotional part to blend into your legal, because that's where you will run into trouble.
And I'd like to
Where do you see that in your financial part?
Yeah, so I'd like to say a lot of clients do have sometimes therapists, and it's not
Hmm.
really helping. I think what's the function of coach is really to get you through that. In the way, I'm the coach on the financial side, you coach more on the legal side. And
Yeah.
I think there are people who significantly impacted by that, and they have maybe some psychological issues and the trauma. You should first get some kind of like real help, right, as a therapy or
Hmm.
perhaps some medications, and then they can maybe go through the process of being coachable through this, because there is another extreme level. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, so as far as, and I'm going to go deeper into this lens, but it is definitely intertwined, and I believe strongly in the three R's. It's the right professional for the right price and the right advice. So you don't want, and I do see it a lot more now in a modern divorce, people becoming efficient, and they do see the cost involved in that, and they don't tend to run to a divorce attorney to solve all the problems. And sometimes I actually feel like I see the legal side also seeing that as well, and they are putting those professionals in the process to fill in the right places, and where they overlap,
Yeah.
then they strategize together. So strategy forms in collaboration is also a benefit from that, is having all these professionals have a different perspective. They bring different view, right? That helps to be more efficient. And again, you
Right.
are paying for the right advice. You're not just paying an attorney to do your financial, your therapy, your
Yeah.
coaching. You're really
Exactly.
being very narrow, scope of responsibilities by your bill.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. So again, I will go through this one a little quickly because it's a little repetitive of what we've talked about. Different paths of divorce, right? You have amicable, which I've already mentioned. Amicable traditionally goes straight to mediation. A couple who wants to be what we call pro se, they don't want to hire attorneys, and potentially they are pre-suit. Pre-suit means they have yet to file anything in court. So it's a couple that says we're going to divorce, okay, but we're going to do it our way. We're going to hire a mediator, get it all done, then we'll go to court and file our papers. That is the least expensive, fastest, most peaceful way to divorce. Okay. But unfortunately, it's not for everyone if you don't have the right personalities involved. And although I said, it is all those wonderful benefits of it, you have to be able to collaborate and be cooperative with your other party. And if that is not your personality with or your relationship personality, it won't work in mediation. So then the next step would be something similar, but with representation. So going into your divorce settlement focus, but saying, we need help. We each do want to have an attorney there to watch out for us, right? But we don't want them to come in and really take over. We each want to have our own support system involved. Those usually will also end in mediation. They try to stay very settlement focused, and that's really like the next step. The third step, the traditional litigation, more of a contentious style divorce, is the one we hear about everywhere. That's what's on TV. That's what's all over social media. That is, we're getting a divorce, we're upset, we hire lawyers, and we go the traditional route, starts with discovery, builds financial disclosures, may work its way to mediation, most likely won't settle in mediation, and continues down that path. Okay. That unfortunately is just the norm for people. They think that's what society says to us. We're divorcing, then we need to go down this contentious route. And I'm here to tell you that is not a mandatory step in divorce. There are other options, and you should explore them. Even if you feel like there's some level of high conflict, it doesn't mean you automatically have to go traditional divorce litigation. You can change your path at any point. And I think people forget that. They think, oh, well, I started, a traditional divorce. Now I can't try to make a left turn and go towards mediation. Well, that's wrong. You can at any point, and I have this conversation literally daily with clients and say, are you unhappy with what's going on? Because if so, let's switch gears. I told a client today, let's tell your attorney to push pause and let's try a different strategy. Because if you don't ever try these things, you'll never know if they're going to work or not. And if you have this idea that, well, I was never really able to communicate before, how am I going to do that in a mediation or a settlement? Well, you don't know if you don't try, because you don't know what the other person is thinking. You see their behaviors, that doesn't always indicate where they are in the divorce. They may want to get out of it as fast as you do also. Okay, so the last one, though, we're starting to hear more about this. And interestingly, Tatiana, I hear a lot about this on the West Coast, is collaborative divorce. It's growing. We have it for sure here in Florida. I'm sure you have it in New York. Collaborative divorce basically means it's pretty much going down the traditional divorce route, but everyone signs a contract that says we will keep it out of court. So you don't have to be agreeing on things, which doesn't make sense because collaborative means you work together. It means we're going to bring in other professionals to help us solve our disputes. We have a custody problem, we may bring in a therapist or a parenting coordinator. We can't agree what to do with our finances, we may bring in a CDFA or a forensic accountant, right? So you bring in other professionals to act kind of like as your judge or your mediator, but you could be as contentious and high conflict, but you're saying, we're not going to go to court. We're going to keep it out of court and settle it with other professionals.
Yeah, and I'd like to clarify this because there's a lot of confusion around it. If this collaborative process is very, very important, if this collaborative process does not work out, you then have to hire, if let's say you have to litigate, you have to hire a completely new team and
Yes.
pay them to get you up to speed, because those collaborative professionals are not allowed to represent you. And it's very important that I'd like to reiterate this. I've seen it. I've been in collaborative divorces. I've been part of it. It works if professionals are knowing what they're doing, if you are willing to agree. But if you're getting there just to make your husband to agree, it's not going to work. It has to be with individuals in the mindset that we are here to agree. We are going to find a way no matter what. If it doesn't work, it can really fire back, because then you have to really get a whole new team in place and get them up to speed, and you already double, in your costs. So, and again, I hear a lot of times collaborative professionals say, if I don't do my job right, I'm not a good professional. And yes, I think they do stand by those standards. But you need to do your homework before you hire any collaborative team. I tend to see them kind of hang out in packs, so if there's a collaborative association somewhere, they are generally there, and you can see they work together and they do cases. So like, ask them, maybe get references, and make sure you are really, because it's a commitment.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
that's
Absolutely.
not-
Absolutely. And I've seen it too, where they may be able to collaborate through time sharing matters and all that, but when it came to the finances, they just deadlocked. And I've had to encourage clients to walk away from the collaborative process and find new counsel to go down the traditional route. And it's an unfortunate, outcome, but it happens. Like I said earlier, just because you commit to one doesn't mean that's where you have to end. And it's important to know that.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Okay, so these are just some, an idea as you're moving through your divorce to keep in mind. There are different personalities that you may assume during divorce. And it's good to be able to identify which one you are. So then you can try to get the support you need to maybe correct it if it is causing a problem. Obviously, in this, as you're reading through, the one at the top is the empowered. That's the person who understands from the beginning, I can't do this alone. I need to bring in other professionals. I need a support system. My attorney is great, but my attorney can't be everything. My attorney is not my therapist. My attorney doesn't have the time to strategize with me. My attorney is not thoroughly educated in finances. I need someone who is, right? So the person who says, I know it's an investment, I know it's a lot more people involved, but those are the people who get through divorce quickly. The more support you have, the more successful your divorce will be. In terms of success means quickly and less expensive. That's how I define success of a divorce. Next would be a fighter, someone who just can't, and this is where their blending of their emotional and their legal, they get lost in it and they just want to win. They want to hurt, they need revenge, whatever it may be. The avoider is someone who just is exactly like it is. I can't do this. I don't want to do it. I'm going to stick my head in the sand and ignore it. The confused, someone who does hire help, but just is so overwhelmed, doesn't really know how to put one foot in front of the other. And lastly, the conflicted caretaker does want to end things and does want to strategize and does do all these things, but has a hard time actually taking action. And I would say a majority of my clients really do fall in that category where they want to do what's right. They hired help because they don't want to necessarily do it alone. They don't want to really hurt the other parent, but they need help supporting themselves. They can't really find the way out. They're feeling overwhelmed, but they do want to do it peacefully. So I think it's important to identify where you are and who your archetype is, because the faster you do that, the faster we can say, okay, well, here's where your root cause is. Maybe the problem is not the other person, maybe it's yourself. It is something that happens. Okay. So as I begin to wrap up my portion, I'm going to hand it over to Tatiana soon. Just want to kind of go through, these are some things to keep in mind as you are entering divorce. And if you're in divorce already, definitely something that you need to kind of ask yourself. These are good kind of checklist items here. When I said reality check, this is where it starts. It's important to know, are you understanding what is being communicated to you from your attorney? Because if you don't, you need to bring in someone to help you break it down. A lot of times that's what I just do with clients. They may send me a motion that they received or a hearing notice or an email from an attorney and say, I just don't get it. Can you please tell me what this means? Another thing is really, I help my clients just prepare for stuff mentally, emotionally, physically, what papers to gather, how to get things together, how to organize them. I've helped people come up with different organizational systems. You really need to do your homework as if you're back in school. If you don't do it, you set yourself up to be, the one being reactive and not proactive. Important to identify when there's red flags with an attorney that maybe you're not paying attention to. And a red flag for one may not be a red flag for another. So it's important, if you're starting divorce, or even if you're in it, but more so if you're at the beginning, identify what are the needs you want from your attorney. And is your attorney matching them as divorce goes on? Because if you need an attorney who is responsive and the one you hired takes a week to respond, that's a major red flag. Maybe this is not the right person for you. Another is identifying how you communicate to your lawyer. Because if you're asking a lot of non-legal questions, that $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 retainer is going to disappear very quickly. So you need to say, am I using my lawyer in the wrong way? Because if so, you need to bring in a different professional to answer those questions for you and provide the support you need. I have clients who want to feel more in the know. Well, Attorneys don't have time to keep you up to speed all the time. They just don't. You may find out they did something a couple weeks prior, but you just found out today. Well, if that's a problem for you, then you need to be more active, or you need to have better communication with your attorney of, please don't make decisions without me being involved. I hired you. You didn't hire me. And lastly, a big part of working with clients is helping you see big picture. Unfortunately, divorce focuses on the little things, and it's very simple to get caught up in that. And if that is you, and you're focusing on the little minutia of things, the day of the week that has to be the transition day, or I can't give up, some certain property because it has value to you. We need you to zoom out. And that's where I come in to give the reality checks of, are you seeing this big picture? Because if you're not, and you're stuck in the minutia, we're going to be having this conversation again in a year. And that's not where we want to be.
Yes, so let's avoid the Groundhog Day, right? I think it's
Yes,
important to have some
absolutely.
reflection in this process and understand, and really does help have a good friends. And I think feel like for women it's easier because we have that support from man. Perhaps I do see them lean more on the professionals because it's just
Hmm.
not the communication, and there is no shame in that. I feel like it's a wonderful thing that you can have something that you are paying for, but you're also getting the right advice rather than
Yeah, yeah.
sort of a
And
judgment.
Tatiana, something I tell a lot of my clients is that you don't need to tell anyone in your world, even your attorney, that you may get additional support somewhere else, whether it's a coach, a therapist, whomever. It is information for you to know. If you want to share that with your attorney, great. But your attorney doesn't need to know, because I'll have clients say, well, like, should I tell my attorney that you and I did this? And my answer is, you don't have to. If you want to, sure. And if not, you could just be the really over-prepared client that showed up to mediation ready to negotiate. That's great. Nobody needs to know, and because I say that because a lot of people are very private during divorce and don't want to share all the things they're doing or the help they're getting or not getting. So if you do decide to bring in other professionals, it's up to you if you want to share that knowledge or not. Doesn't matter. Excuse me. Okay, lastly, it's really important to take a more whole, and this is exactly what I was talking about, zooming out, taking a holistic approach to your divorce. And this is where Tatiana is going to come in real soon after and focus on the money part of it, the financial part of it. You need to set your expectations early. That means putting those misconceptions aside and just focusing on what we need to get you out of the divorce, not getting stuck in the minutia again, starting to learn what divorce is. Spend some time and maybe look up these words. What are these words that I keep hearing from my attorney? Chat GPT can be your friend. It can also be your enemy if you use it wisely. Use it to help you understand maybe what is a status conference. I don't know, my attorney keeps throwing that word around. What does that mean? Look it up. Look it up. Find out, right? Don't go back to your attorney with an email as, what does this mean? Because that's going to be $100 email you just sent to get clarity. Don't do that. There's a lot of information out there. If you don't have support from someone, try to do your own research. Very also important, like we talked about those red flags, keeping in mind what are your needs through the divorce and making sure they get met with the professionals you do bring in. Also important of helping you be taking all this legal jargon that's thrown around and making it more relatable, so you can understand from a normal person's level what's happening here. What does all this stuff mean, right? Because a lot of the legal stuff and legal jargon is just the way the lawyers function, but it doesn't need to be discussed at that kind of, it sounds like foreign language. You can bring in the help, you can look up, you can get the research for yourself as well. A big part of what I do with my clients is helping them save. Like I've said, save on money. I help speed up the process. Definitely a big part is communication, helping you communicate better with your attorney, with your ex, even with your children, whomever is involved. It's really important piece. If you can't be a good communicator in divorce, then you are going to set yourself up for failure because you're not properly getting the wheels moving here. So with that being said, I'm now going to turn it over to Tatiana, who's going to take everything that I just talked about, but really focus on the financial part of it.
Thank you, Jenny, and I'll take it from here. So let's look at the divorce through a financial lens. Essentially, courts look at the marriage as a business partnership that you have entered and you've carried on, and now you need to unwind. And essentially, marriage is an legal contract, but it's also an economic contract. Kids do cost money, and even that house on the little shack on the beach where you want to teach the yoga has to be financed, and there is taxes needs to be paid, and the income needs to be produced to sustain your lifestyle in the future. So whatever you're contemplating and walking away from that partnership really has to make sure that it does serve you well in the long run. So I would like you to go to basics and understand that you have created this marriage. You've put time in this nest egg. You invested in it, right? Your time is an investment. You've gotten yourself somewhere in life. You've built yourself a nest egg. There could be complexities of business, kids involved, 529s. It is your responsibility to unwind your business in the best economic and fair possible way. And divorce often starts with very good intentions. We'll work it out. We don't need an attorney and we'll figure it out. But even amicable splits need clarity, because what you think that is equal and half and fair, sometimes if you look in the long run, might be completely wrong for you and not a right fit. So let's do this right. And the net worth really is the foundation of every marriage, right? It's like the house. The net worth is on the bottom, and it's what you stand on the ground firmly with. You need to understand that net worth. You need to understand what part of it is liquid, what part of it is illiquid. And then you form a strategy, and you want to be in charge of creating that strategy. And if you don't understand your net worth and the foundation of it, you're going to need help from the outside to craft that strategy. Lawyers are great. I work in tandem with lawyers. The function of attorneys is not to create laws. The function of attorneys to interpret the law and present and protect and represent their client's best interests. They often do a lot of legal work behind the ground, but they are not financial individuals. They did not go to school for finances. That's what I do on a daily basis. It's quicker for me and easier. Lawyers, they went to school for concepts. That said, they are instrumental in interpreting the law, especially if you are going that legal route. They are essential to interpret the law and how that affects your interpersonal finances in your marriage. Again, just to stress out, that's your responsibility to untangle your marriage, not the systems. Systems are there to fix big issues, big problems, and the entitlement gap that you're receiving relying on the system is just a mirage. It's never going to be there. So if you're not a numbers person, you need to learn fast, find the ways, work with professionals. Please do understand that alphabet and speak that financial language so you can stand your ground in the negotiations. Either it's between the attorneys or mediation, a lot firmly. You could do it yourself with CDFA. I highly encourage to work with a lawyer. Also, it really helps to have a coach professional like Jenny along the way that you can really understand the law and mold that information and be that knowledgeable spouse with the help of the right professionals. Lawyers are not your financial guides, and you really should be in charge of your strategy. But strategy starts with knowledge. So when you start your marriage and you're essentially, created a nest egg for yourself, sometimes you plan for possible divorce and there are prenups involved and a lot of complexities around it. There's some assets that were accumulated premaritally now will have to be looked at as a premarital portion or not. So during this process, if you go through a traditional legal route, there is this process that's called a discovery. I'm sure some of you that's in the process, they're already familiar with that, some of them not. Often lawyers send you lots of questionnaires, essentially they called, where you can answer them, provide lots of statements, lots of documents behind the scenes. And that's where I'd like you to not just be gullible and just go through the process blindly. Understand, do I need to go to this costly discovery process? is my divorce is that complex that we will really need to initiate that. Really understand when you want to say no to something, maybe push back, maybe do trust a lawyer and take that traditional route, because you could have assets that you're not aware of. And what lawyers essentially do in the discovery, they're trying to understand what is the lifestyle of the spouses, what is the income that they supported that lifestyle, what are assets they have. So discovery could be what you make of it, right? It could be a very lengthy process. It could be more of a disclosure, right away before you do the lawyer. You could come prepared with a lot of that information, maybe in some spreadsheets, maybe in some documents, maybe summarized. You will save the money in the discovery, but it has to be done the right way. Because if you don't, then you're going to have to go back and forth and then do something that's wrong, and then you could end up spending more money. So the forensics, mediation, what are you trying to keep up with and understand? Forensics are often perceived very expensive, and people sort of crawl back with a notion of, I need to have a forensics involved. Well, that's where I give them a lot of respect. Not often you need to have a forensics, and some information and some analysis could be done with CDFA like myself. However, there are some situations that really are requiring somebody who is more of a in-depth numbers person, such as business analysis, such as analysis of an income if it's complex, for example, partners that file in multiple states, because that's going to be that baseline scenario of what you're going to look for the alimony. What was your income that supported your lifestyle? So it's very important to have a professional to do this the right, because that's going to dictate the numbers that we're going to create down the line. And when you go into mediation, for example, if you're choosing that traditional route, that's the most probably inexpensive and efficient way. And I highly suggest you go there once you do your homework, right? When you study for the test. So you are not paying for confusion when you're in the middle of this. I often see clients that come to me that almost like gone through probably 5 rounds of mediation, and all of a sudden they feel like, I can't agree to this at the very final stages, because they feel that the more sophisticated spouse telling them, yes, this is the good scenario, I think we're doing well here. And in the meantime, not sophisticated spouse is completely kind of like starting to get very much so going backwards and getting this paralysis by analysis, feeling like she's being pressed into something that she does not understand. So again, before you're going to spend money on any of these sessions where you are together with another spouse and you negotiate something, you want to go into it with your homework done. Otherwise, it's a waste of money. Also, going back and forth between attorneys, I would strongly encourage you to not take a reactive side, but take a proactive side. And how can you be proactive? Well, if you go to my website, I have a lot of checklists. I have budget sheets. I have all these documents and instruments that essentially let you be organized during this time. So before you even go to a lawyer, before you even go to mediation, you will have ability to save the money by being very organized, structured, and really understand your life, right? Courts are not going to uphold the unrealistic lifestyles. They are going to want to honor your living. And second time around, when you leave that marriage and that economic contract, how is this going to look for you realistically? Because now you're living maybe on one income and you're in one household, and now you're going to have one income supporting 2 households. So it's a very delicate, very intricate matter, and should be taken seriously. You should take your time and really take your best aim at this process and do it with a very good, clear eye. And by doing so, you need to be financially literate. Divorce is never fair. It really isn't about fairness, right? It's all about what is the right way to split these assets to finance each of your lives, right? It's not only about you. There's also another individual who is going to be paying maybe to you that alimony, or vice versa. How is this sustainable to give and take and still be on your own 2 feet? And Divorce is about the proof, not fairness, right? It's really demonstrating with your spending the lifestyle you've lived, not because you think so. The numbers have to dictate that. And alimony is very rarely forever. Courts really are looking in the alimony through the angle of the lens of the business partnership, that they really try to apply it as a temporary means so you can get on your feet and move into your second chapter more financially independently, and create that type of and maybe structure where you can get a job, some training, or start to build your nest egg and save that alimony so you can be a little bit more closer to that financial independency. Strategy is not done by the emotions. You really want to try to be as clear-headed as possible. I know it's a very big ask, and that's why it's very important to work with someone like Jenny, who can really craft that strategy in tandem with the financial side. Because it's very rarely you see the 50-50 split. It's not like you're going through all your marital belongings and you splitting your shoes, one shoe for, one spouse keeps the other shoe. It's not how it's done, right? It's often has to make sense. What provides you liquidity? Does it make sense for me to keep the house? I have only 3 years worth of that mortgage with a low interest rate. Should I maybe try to negotiate around it that I don't have to give institution the money for refinancing, higher interest rate? Because essentially that's the money going out to the institution and it's not staying in your family. Often making that in numbers and bringing this to mediation or negotiations kind of really does speak for itself, and makes like a pause in a way, and it does create an aha moment, like, well, why should I shell out 150,000 for refinancing, getting myself into the higher exposure of the interest rates that are higher? Why don't I take that in Fund 529s, right? There is some leverage that you can do. There are some creative solutions that you can work with, but you really do need to work with someone who knows what they do, and that's the financial professionals, because maybe throughout your life, that's not was your focus, nor is you wired that way. 401k is not a cash. That's just throwing a couple samples. 401k is not the cash that's immediate, right? You have to remember you can be 59 and a half to draw on this. And often I have people call me and ask me, I have a pension. One, it's not a pension, it's a 401k, right? Pension is many things. You really need to look under the hood and understand, what is that account? What does that mean? How does it function? How can I take the money? What is the taxation on that? And that's a lot to to do your homework about. And please, for anyone out there, do not worry about being removed from 401k while you are in the process. They often, there's this sort of like an insurance policy. If one spouse, something happens to them in divorce, you as a beneficiary want to still make sure I am not removed from 401k. Seems like one of the things that I really get a lot in the contentious divorces. So 401k, most institutions do function to protect the beneficiary, so no one can just abruptly remove you from 401k. The spouse essentially by default a beneficiary unless you waive that right in writing, and that there is forms for that. So if you feel that you're going to be removed in the background, please know that nobody cannot do that without you giving up something formally. Keeping the house is often very emotional decision. Remember, strategy is not emotions. Yes, it is something your kids are tied to, but you have to understand realistically, how is this going to work for me? Do you want to keep that house and every day you wake up and thinking, how can I really sustain living here? And sometimes you really have a perspective when you see the numbers. And that's what I do in my financial planning with my clients. We go through numbers and make sure, if we want to keep the house, what can we downsize in the house? How can we, eliminate certain expenses? Or maybe it makes sense to take out the equity and get something a little smaller, and maybe try to create creative solutions to buying another spouse out while maintaining that ownership and the interest rates structure that you have. And I feel that when you create all these facts and these patterns, it really does make the financial side of divorce a bit more clear, and it makes the legal strategy a little bit easier to craft how to get what you want and what you need, because you do have sort of more of a how is much more clear. So the why becomes easier. I'm sorry, the why is much more clear. So the how to get to that becomes easier. So strategies that starts with the numbers, with your own knowledge, not the courtroom that you rely on the system that often is just a band-aid, and really there to solve bigger issues and not unwind the partnership that you've created in the marriage. So now going simply to from the asset piece where I said the net worth is the foundation of the marriage to now the income, right? Income throughout marriages maybe it was different at some point, maybe it was steady, some of it maybe had other income levels to that outside of salary, maybe some business income, often could be for higher executives, some restricted stock and stock options, right? You have to understand what is this income, right? Because that's the stream of injection of the cash after tax that was put into your marriage throughout the years that funded your lifestyle. Granted, I've seen a lot of families live not only on their income, they also live on earnings of their investments. So remember, that's two different things, right? There is an income that you make by investing your time, and then there is income from your assets that are from the investment of your assets, right? So when you say you need a 25,000 a month on your documents for court or mediation, you really have to be realistic. What proof do you have that you are requiring that much of money a month to live on? Often receipts, looking simply Amazon made it very easy, or just, credit card spending could be that proof. And you want to stay probably within that realm, unless you want to go through this, this is where you can kick in that lengthy discovery process, where if you are not near as to what other spouse feels like you had, you then gonna have to go into this whole back and forth of attorneys, really unwinding a lot of your credit card statements, really figuring out, throwing around Excel sheets, what are we really spending? So kind of going into this process already and polishing the basics, like your income. Again, income could be many things, right? The income is the cash inflow. Really understanding the income cash inflow, really understanding what your net worth, and then going into what's my cash outflow during the marriage, because that's going to determine your cash outflow after the marriage, which is negotiated in the divorce. So budgeting, I don't like that word budgeting because it's so into it really does make you feel like it's in today's day budget, like today, what is my spending? But in the divorce, that is often what is the beginning of getting that number of your lifestyle funding. That's the budget. What is your spending today, and how is this going to look like going forward? So, budget is your strongest legal tool. This is where you can petition for the alimony, or essentially maybe even asset split that can finance that budget. If you can't explain expenses, do not justify them, and you can't justify them, then you are not going to include that, because essentially everything has to require proof, and if another spouse disagrees on the spending, it's going to fire back at you. So be realistic, but I also want you not to be too rigid on this. Make sure you are understanding that the gifts, even the Botox that you've been receiving, or even if it's like a little bit up there and the cost, that's your spending. So include all of this, right? Not unrealistic, don't overstate it, but do include everything. And do not forget the gifts, the Christmases, and all that stuff that you have done over the years and was a pattern in your family. That's also considered to be your lifestyle. So you do want to include that, right? So another factor is the entitlement gap, and Jenny touched on this a little bit. Entitlement gap, I often feel that people get that from that notion that the system is there to unwind that divorce. So the reality is, between the entitlement gap and what you actually going to be receiving is like there's this really long journey. And often that create contentious, that's not needed, that's going to cost you the money. And then entitlement is a mirage. You're not going to get that money. All you're going to get is you're going to put the not your kids through colleges, but your attorney kids through colleges, right? So please be realistic on this. And the entitlement is not going to be served for you, on the platter during the court process. What math does, it really advocates for itself. So if you lived a lifestyle that was high and it was really essentially financed by the other things like debts, and there is really no money in the marriage, then it's not gonna really help you in the divorce once you're gonna go through a process and you're gonna understand that we were spending more than we were making, and we maybe are on the verge of figuring out financially if we can sustain anything is gonna actually come out of this marriage. And that's where the courts are not going to create money for you. High spending is not wealth. Wealth is something you've accumulated as a business, and you have tangible assets or liquid assets that are in your net worth. So debt isn't an asset, right? It's not going to create you that funding and going to a court system to enforce more debt to continue funding of that lifestyle. Often that's very rude awakening, and I feel sorry for individuals that have to go through this, but there is a hope, and then it's better, later than never, and rebuild that financial independence, but at least try to take the steps. And I often say that financial planning does not start after the divorce when you pick up the pieces and sort of kind of broken, move forward and figure out your life. Financial planning should be empowering. It should really start in the middle of your divorce, and it should be something that you have full knowledge and empowers you because you have a way of influencing the process, negotiating something, and advocating for yourself that will serve you well in the future. And essentially, once you're done with your process, the rest is gonna be your implementation, not anymore creating the new financial plan, because you are actually creating a financial plan in the middle of the divorce by forecasting what is my future is gonna look like in terms of my spending, and what assets do I have to close that gap if there is a gap, or what surplus I'll have that I can maybe create a different lifestyle for myself. Or maybe I have to downsize and move to a different state with a lower tax bracket or even different country. In some great divorces, I see cases like that where you can feel that you can live the quality of life, but in a different realm of the finances and under different values and a different, exchange rate and tax system. So that's something that's very important and you have to think through. Now that I give you all the background of sort of and I highlight some things that I often see not a reality, and I hope that I did a good job to really advocating that for you. Now you can sort of understand, where do you fall on this graph? Choose your role, choose your outcome. What spouse are you in a divorce? Do you want to be the covered wife? I think Jenny touched on this a little bit, where you delegate everything and you kind of stay blind to the process and trust without clarity to the professionals, right? It could be, often I see couples have that if it's a lot of wealth during their lifetime, and it continues to be sort of like, I don't want to be involved. I just want to be entitled to what I had in my marriage, and I want to be divorced that way. And that's fine. That's what you choose. Just understand that you really delegate a lot to other professionals, and essentially they are going to be your confidants, you really make sure you have a very good trust built with them, and because you put a lot of faith in them, to trust them to do what's right for you without you really being involved in the process. So they really should know that they know what's right for you intimately, because they're advocating for you essentially without you being there. So if you want to be that informed wife or husband, often, it depends. I more often see a wife because they stay at home and they don't get involved in their financials. But as the time comes,
they do want to step up and learn about this. And that's when they become that really informed wife, but by asking a lot of questions. And generally, they go to an attorney. And attorneys don't have time, nor are they doing a great job to really educate you. That's not their function. So you don't want to rely only on the attorney to teach you. They want, right? So that's your sort of pseudo-informed wife. Sometimes having a legal coach can help a little bit, but the legal coach like Jenny, they don't cover financial side, right? They can help you to understand and be informed on the legal side, and that's the part where attorneys cannot cover. But you still need to cover the financial side, and that's really unlikely going to be a lawyer. And then lastly, if you want to be this empowered wife, which is a notch out from the informed, and that's where you really are taking the charge of your process, right? And you build your team of professionals, you own your strategy, you're learning the alphabet of this divorce, such as legal and financial, and you staying actively engaged. And that's what I call and the in the know spouse. I had a recent case where and a wife called me that her first words were, I want to speak his language. We have a pretty high net worth we've created together. I wasn't involved, but we are now in the negotiation stages, and he's not very, it's not an amicable divorce, and I want to speak his language. It's a great divorce. She understands whatever she's going to walk away from is going to provide and sustain her lifestyle. She's very vested in this because there is no way she can earn the money or even run the businesses. It really her essentially destiny in the future, the financial destiny, really heavily relies on how well she navigates the strategy. She felt that attorney was doing a good job, but attorney doesn't know her husband how she knows it. So she wanted to learn that language to negotiate with him, but also be empowered during this process. And that's sounds like a full-time job. Yes, you do have to sort of take on a lot, but with the right professionals by your side, you don't have to know every nitty-gritty detail. What you really have to know is enough that to be sort of your CFO of your life, right? And then you have the CEOs on the legal side and the CEO on the financial side, that you understand the big picture, and then you fill in the strategy buckets with the right professional advice who are more ingrained and see through certain things that you will not be able to see at this point. Especially, I would say, going in the knowledge during the emotional time from like the 0 to 100 overnight or a few days or a few weeks is virtually impossible. You know, there's a really simple psychology behind this. There's only so much information you can learn. And you can be very empowered, but you could be also overwhelmed at the same time once you start doing it. So I'm always very careful as to how much information I want to go through with clients in the beginning. And perhaps, first it's in the portion, and then we increase that over time and make that longer hours where we really want to go into the agreement and tackle this and see like what's this proposal on the table. And unlike attorneys, I would say the difference between me and the attorney is I'm not going to give you many options and ask you, what do you think about it? What I'm going to do is I'm going to build a strategy. I'm going to educate you about what I'm doing. And then also I'm going to tell you why you should do what I'm recommending and what my strategy is, because I'm going to justify why we're doing what we're doing, and I'm going to educate you to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. So essentially we are partners in this. I will never do anything without your disapproval, but I also know the details much more than you do. But you know your husband or wife more intimately than I do. So it's very helpful to have you by my side to make this negotiation essentially much more effective. So work with CDFA to understand your numbers, work with legal coach to guide your process, and really interpret the numbers with the legality behind it. Because again, attorneys are not going to have time to do that with you. And I will leave you with this. The 3 R's are very important. It should be fundamental in any divorces or any even business partnerships. The right professional for the right price and for the right advice. Do not see your divorce being dissolved by one lawyer only. It's not how modern divorces are done. More and more individuals recognize this. The world is changing, technology changes things, and you want to have the right parties for the right things. That's the economy of scale, right? You paying for the right advice. You're not overpaying for the right advice. You are essentially paying for the right work. And that's the right way to go about the divorce. And if you are still believing that, my attorney can do all of this, I think you're a bit in a rude awakening. And I don't believe that your divorce is going through standard and quality control that it should be going through. So just touch a little bit on the great divorces, because some of us may be here in that age where they are looking to dissolve that marriage in the later stages of life. And that's one of the very, very delicate and yet like almost, I don't want to be negative about this, but it's also a very sad part, because most of the lifestyle and that nest that you've built, if you did not build enough and you are going on your own in two households and you're separating one, it could not be enough. And then where do you go to fill in the gap? Unfortunately, often you can't fill in the gap because you either not career-wise in that stage where you can work, or you could work, but really at the minimal, and you don't have basically the runway to make up that shortfall that you need now, separating yourself in the two households from the one. So often why we see less of these divorces is because people like to live their later stage of their life together, even if they not necessarily best fit for each other, but economically it dictates they cannot split. Especially the times right now, I feel that impact of the inflation and the interest rates, the changes in the 401k balances or market volatility do create a lot of fear around the split, and it does affect your lifestyle where you have to adjust. So health expenses are rising. That's a big concern for elderly, and Medicare and Medicaid planning around it, kind of having a foresight as to how you're gonna live on that next chapter during that great divorce is crucial. It's just very crucial. And having the right professional, even if it costs a little bit, could really benefit, because you are really doing the best due diligence to walk away from this marriage and with the right asset mix, with the right alimony and any support, because you're going to have no other room to fill in the gap when all of a sudden you don't feel like you have enough. So asset misuse has very, very much so lifelong consequences. And every dollar you have has to work for you, right? You cannot guess. You really have to take a very clear aim and take your shot on this one. And lastly, just kind of dive into the CDFA function and the CFP, which is me, as a strategist during divorce. I don't guess. I model, I project, and my function as to what I was as a CFP, which is a certified financial planner over the years. I've always did financial planning for families, intact families. And I've seen many typical families. I understood the dynamic and lifestyle and the net worth. So I can play with many circumstances as to how I can see the dissolution of the marriage and what you're contemplating there, and translate a lot of that emotional chaos into more of a logic by presenting you the numbers. For example, I can do scenario modeling. Often I actually work a lot of times with a legal coach to understand kind of like what is this contemplating. And easiest thing to work with a legal coach is they're more accessible. It's easier for me to understand what the client is doing with the lawyer on the legal side by communicating with a legal coach. And that's what helps me to interpret that financial foundation that I have at my disposal. How am I going to craft that into some kind of modeling for that spouse to take with her in the next chapter. And that's where scenario modeling becoming. Once I've gotten the income, and it could be a financial professional like a forensics involved and truly understand the income, right? What the household had. And it's all done with proof, not just assumption and persuasion or entitlement gap. Once you have all these numbers, you create scenarios. What if we take more in assets, less in alimony? What if we take alimony up front a little bit more and less down the line? Again, the numbers have to also justify on the other side, right? Can he give you that alimony up front? Is it even feasible to ask? And that's where that knowledge of being a CFP for intact family comes in, because I understand a personal dynamic, right? If an executive who earns a couple million a year isn't going to be forever earning that money, you cannot be realistically expecting that he's going to be till 65 and bringing you that type of earning. Most executives get pushed out in their mid 50s. So you have to also be very, very realistic. So I'm bringing this life knowledge plus professional knowledge into this. And I really do minimize the contention because a lot of times people feel like, oh, well, if you are representing one side, well, I'm really not ever representing one side. What I'm really doing is I'm leveling the ground so that one wife or husband, whoever is less knowledgeable party, comes up to a bit of a higher rank in that and evens out with a more knowledgeable party. And often you see a sophisticated spouse who comes at you with all these spreadsheets and thinking like I know it all. Often I have to take that person a little bit down with their expectations because, a typical CPA, how he views finances isn't how the law and the personal finances dictate in the divorce. For example, if you're dividing a marriage, you can't just split your spending in the middle. It's not how the dissolution of marriages work. And if there are children involved that will have some kind of shared custody element, then there are expenses that are overlapped, right? So there's different buckets there. It's not so straightforward in half. And often I think professionals that have done math for their most of their life have a bit of a tunnel vision in that way, and it takes another professional to bring them out in the right clarity, and a legal coach who gives you a strategy to understand that's kind of where we should be, that's what we should, and justify the legal background behind the law that we're applying to that number. And I can model a lot of scenarios of what if, playing around with different financial planning techniques. For example, alimony is not an income on the federal level at this time. So when you are going to the divorce and you have some qualified assets, which qualified assets, for someone that you don't know, those are tax deferred assets. You put pre-tax money there. I'm not going to focus too much on that, but you can convert the pre-tax money to after-tax money at some point in your life and pay minimum tax, because now the alimony is not an income. And what it does, it's not affecting your tax bracket. So by having a very minimal tax bracket, you are not converting a qualified asset and making this after-tax money at the very minimal expense is almost like a sin. And a lot of times people don't know that, right? And that's the pieces that you pick up after the divorce. But I am being in the middle of this process, can really kind of put my eyes on certain assets that might benefit my client in the long run more than the other spouse. Also, dependence. In some cases, if the ex-spouse that's going to be ex at some point is still going to continue to be a high earner, there's no benefit of having the dependents to be alternating, for example, back and forth. Why? If the other spouse in this such a phase out stages, then none of that is going to benefit them. Why not give those dependents to a less financial advanced wife and make sure she can take the most benefit from that, right? So these type of things I can see by being strategic about the negotiations. It really does make a difference, right? Taxes is one of the biggest sort of income takers. When you look at the pie of your income, some of it goes to taxes, some of it goes to your spending, and where else it goes, right? And the earning, right? The interest rates that you have in your portfolios, are they high or low, right? That also determines the liquidity you're going to have from those accounts that you're going to inherit. But essentially, taxes, they do eat a lot of your income. And that's something you have to be very smart about and be strategic. So tax planning is very important during this process, especially if you're getting complex couples where there's a higher net worth accumulated over the time and their businesses involved. So what I do is I equip the lawyers, the professionals, to go into these mediations or negotiations with an argument that has a numbers that back up to it, not just the statements, right? Or supposed to be, or by law, right? I also have another layer of logic to that. So that's very important. And that's what gives it financial clarity. And that's your biggest legal play in that, right? Numbers, you can't avoid them. They speak for themselves. And I often go in mediation cases with attorneys where I can on a spot, by bringing my financial planning software where I built out the case for my client already, I can really negotiate and see if that makes sense what we're doing. And right on the spot, I can tell you, no, it doesn't. We probably shouldn't go for this. And also, it does save the money, creates more efficiency, and attorneys love to have a partner who can right away translate what they're negotiating, that legal aspect, into the numbers. And you know what? It does make one of the spouses more easy to come around and maybe give up certain things because they see the contention, and is this worth for me to go pursue another 100 to 200,000 this 401k when I already know what I need to endow my lifestyle? And do I want to spend that health? Because essentially the time, the nerves, that focus that you have on getting that entitled asset or whatnot is also an investment, right? So is this worth it? And if you know you don't need it, would you want to just walk away from that? And on the opposite side, if you know that I am in debt if I don't really get my right half, and I'm going to be firmly staying on my ask, and I have a reason to, and I know if I don't get it, I'm really not going to be in a good place after divorce. And you can do that, but mindfully so, with the cost that's involved in that, right? So again, it's just the logic. We're replacing the emotional size with a knowledge. Knowledge brings empowerment. Empowerment brings more clarity and logic. So the only three numbers that I think matter in divorce, in my experience, in my view, is that net after-tax monthly cash flow. And I covered this in a little bit in the taxes. That's very important after tax. Remember, whatever you're spending, whatever that sum you're going to come up at the end of your budget, that is your after-tax money. So if you're spending a couple $100,000 a year, you need to make, depending on the tax bracket, but you probably need to make at least $400,000 to finance that couple $100,000 in spending. And if you're going to be negotiating something to cover that spending, you have to remember this is after tax. So it's probably the double that you need to really cover that bare minimum. And the post-divorce liquidity, what you can spend today, right? Making sure the businesses, how liquid they are, making sure that you have a right balance between taxable and tax deferred, which you cannot access without penalty until you are 59 and a half. So you want to make sure you walk away with what makes sense. Do not take the house, because house is illiquid asset. If you have a house, you need to have something attached to it in your divorce, other assets or liquidity or some income cash flow that could sustain your lifestyle on top of you living in that house. House is an asset, but it's a hard asset. It's illiquid and often is not even rational one to own. And what third and last what it leads to is the long-term viability. Can you be retired? And it's not so much the concept of retirement, it's more a concept of the financial independency. How am I close to that financial independency number? Am I 70% there after divorce and I have to really fill in that 30% with my income after my divorce, or maybe continue saving the alimony and maybe downsize a little bit? right? So you working with me on this financial planning during divorce while we contemplate different scenarios, you also then mindfully take yourself long term, thinking how I'm going to be planning my trajectory. And I hope it's a better plan than just hoping that you remarry, because second marriages and the divorce rate on those are a lot higher. And Jenny can attest to that. So just leave you with this. Divorce can feel very overwhelming and emotionally, legally, and financially, but it does not have to be. You are, a lot of times people don't want to pay if they don't see value in the professionals, but this is for me to create awareness for you to understand that you are paying someone, and I want to make sure you are paying the right party for the right advice and for the right price. And with the right guidance, you can really replace that fear, that paralysis by analysis with the facts. And that guidance is done with very thorough education and the compassionate accountability. That's very important. I think Jenny's great at this. She can really hold you accountable, and keep that process moving along. That's what coaches are really great for. And I love doing that, because if there's certain things we had a clear vision and we came up with a plan, but it's not being done, what's the breakdown in the process? Where is this? Is this a confusion from the legal standpoint? Then I'll join the coach. We'll have a conference and we'll understand what's here missing, what puzzle is not working, it's not fitting right? So we're clearing this confusion with a strategy. And essentially, lawyers excellent at implementing that, right? And advocating for you. They take in this outwards to the parties, to the negotiation. And that's when the magic happens. There's so much work that's done underneath there that is not seen in that table. But if it's done right, it could be a very short span at that table and much more efficient. And it could really create more clarity for you going forward. So my friends, I'll leave you with this. If you have any questions, again, I am a divorce strategist, but I'm also a financial planner. And I often, when I work with my clients, I tell them that I love to take you through this process. It's an amazing journey, and I'm grateful that I get to be part of this with you. And there's so much trust built, and you get to know each other so intimately through this process. But really, where my heart is really to take you to the next chapter, because whatever you're going to negotiate on that piece of paper, and your legal coach is going to be there for you. And once we finalize everything, then the real work starts. You have to implement that a marital settlement agreement. Then there's assets that have to be split. Quadros for qualified money need to be executed. Mortgages have to be refinanced. Bank accounts have to be open. Investment accounts have to be open and transferred. And institutions often can be extremely difficult around the divorce paperwork. And just being and doing this for a while, I've had polished my process, and I make it much more efficient and painless, because you really want to move on. You want to start that new life, but there's still work to be done. Here you negotiate the shell. Now we have to fill this in with the real tangible assets and start moving on with your life. And then I become your confidant throughout the life journey. And hopefully I see you less and less, and you really are going to be focused on what matters, and essentially trust that process that we had and put trust in me that we've created. And you can still be held accountable by me, because whatever we negotiate, I want to make sure you're staying that course in that next chapter, because the worst case scenario that I've seen is individuals get so happy and just forgetful for a moment that this is like life that backed up by numbers and they haven't been ingrained in it. You cannot carry that mentality. You do have to understand you have a strict budget you might have to follow. It could be a larger budget. You could have a very big spending numbers. It's still a budget. You want to stay within that. And for the spouse who is not a financial person before, it's very hard to keep them accountable. So it's like a skill to have a compassionate accountability, but a little bit with the reality. So you are really staying on your course, because no one's going to make you to do something you don't want to do. But educating you and keeping you accountable is probably the best mix. So you can make your decisions. If they are irrational, gullible, and naive, that's something you're gonna have to own. But at least I'll provide you the choices. So thank you for your time today.
This is our information. I'm in a metro area of New York. Jenny's in Florida. We're not state specific. We work with any individuals. We are a good team. You don't have to hire us both. You can consult with us separately. I give free 30-minute consultations for giving my allergies. But Jenny has her own. I'll let her speak for yourself.
Yep. Just like you, Tatiana, I offer free consultations. Always. It's a 30-minute consultation. And we really use that time to kind of identify why you're seeking support. Where are you stuck? What are you looking to achieve by bringing in, myself for this type of support? Some people just want the help at the beginning, and some people are stuck. They're in divorce. They don't know really which way to go. Maybe they're not trusting their lawyer. Maybe they're tired of spending legal fees, whatever it may be. So I in my consults try to help identify what are their root problems and then how I can support them. So if you're interested in that, you can feel free to email me at the email on the screen. I also have a very large Instagram account in terms of content. I am constantly putting out lots of videos and information out there. So if you're not ready for a consult, feel free to go take a deep dive down my Instagram account and look for maybe the answer for your question is already on there. I'm happy to, pay it forward with those little clips.
So Jenny, we have a couple questions I'd like to
Yeah.
ask you here. If you disagree with your attorney, what happens? Let's say
It's a
you.
really good question.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a good question. The first thing I need to figure out is what are you disagreeing on? Is it the procedure, the pace that things are happening at, or are you disagreeing on strategy of the way your divorce is happening? Once you determine what the problem is, where you're disagreeing, then I can help to give you the options of how to correct it. It could be a simple conversation with your lawyer. That's the easiest correction, and I've helped people do that all the time. Another could be as large as saying, well, it sounds like you and your lawyer are on two different pages, and it may be time to go have a consult with a new one and find out if you do need to pivot away from your initial representation and find new representation. I've had people switch a couple times when I've helped them. It just because you hire an attorney doesn't mean that's the one that needs to represent you the whole time. You need to do your due diligence when you are bringing an attorney in and find the right fit for you based on your personality, your needs, the way that attorney functions, and make sure that you match up.
Okay.
Uh,
So,
yeah,
yep, very common question, and just someone put in, what if your ex-spouse is
sure.
hiding the money, and how can I access those financial documents? And how can I
That's
protect?
something I hear all the time for you. It's a great question for you.
So, you know, it happens more than you think. And I think the right professional, like I see tax returns, I see statements every day. That's what I do for a living. I could help you to, even though I can't find you those assets perhaps, but I can find you to really figure out what is missing. I can see more complete picture and what doesn't make sense. And together we can strategize and perhaps have an attorney to involve to further do a discovery. But I could tell you for sure if something doesn't smell right, a lot of times you can start from your personal returns and really see kind of like what are the gaps that are we missing in the documents that were provided. And a lot of times also simple logic, if you have a lifestyle that's been financed, but you're now getting all these documents and you do not see that, like, all right, that clearly something we're missing here because we were living on a different type of income over the years.
Hmm.
And that's the start. Again, you have to look for a full disclosure. And I think, Jenny, you can comment what's the full disclosure, kind of like what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure is when it comes to finances in terms of the legal process is you really need to open up your books 100% and be completely transparent. I would say, unfortunately, many people come into divorce already not trusting their spouse. That could be exactly why they're going through a divorce. The lack of communication, money, as you know, Tatiana, is a big probably the leading source of divorce, where the parties are not communicating. Maybe they kept separate finances during the whole marriage. One is responsible for one thing, one's responsible for another, and then they don't follow through on those things. So unfortunately, when you have that type of situation where you're not really sure the financial piece here, it's really important to get that neutral third party to come in and assess what's happening. Where's the breakdown? What's the problem? Is there money that wasn't being disclosed? I mean, I spoke to a client this week about that, and he's been pressuring her to try to settle and stop using their attorneys. And so our shift together this week was, okay, let's try to do that. Let's try to stop the legal process. He's throwing you these signs that he wants to settle. So you could still, even not knowing the full financial picture, all of his disclosures, because chances are he hasn't fully disclosed everything for whatever reason, which usually are shady reasons, but it doesn't always matter. You could still take the mindset that you are settlement focused. So I'm going to throw out some settlement options and see if he bites on them. Because if he does, it's not about, like we said, what you think you're entitled to. What do you want? What do you need? What will make you feel like you're able to move on with your life? And it doesn't have to be 50-50. I know you had that in one of your last slides. 50-50 doesn't always equal fair, or fair is not going to equal 50-50. Fair is what is fair for you. What do you need? And many times it may not be 50-50, right? And you could fight for 50-50 all the way to the end to get to trial, be in that 5%, and still not get that 50-50 for whatever the purpose is. So it's really important to assess what do you truly need, and bringing you in who can do that planning to say, based on your lifestyle, what is it that you truly need? Because maybe you can sidestep some of the legal process if you have someone who's hiding money, right? To go fishing on that expedition could take a really long time and a lot of money to find hidden funds.
Yeah, and I want to put a pin on this. So, for example, some divorces that I do, the wife that was at home and was taken care of by a spouse who was bringing more significant amount of money into the home, and she stayed, took off time, and raised the kids, and she is still entitled to get anything. Some man brainwashed those individuals saying like you didn't work ever and you're not entitled to any of this. Well, that's not true. You have contributed to this marriage. You raised the children, and he was able to go to work and earn money because you came home, you were staying at home and held the household. And also, so when you say negotiations, like I like you to encourage thinking is so in some divorces, the husband says, well, I'll take care of you. Don't worry about it. So let's go to mediation. Well, what does that mean? I'll take care of you, right? How do you quantify that, right? You can't just go,
Mhm.
I'll take care of you, right? Lifestyle analysis, divorce a lot of times looked in the silo of like today, what is this today spending? So what I do with cases like that, we go through this exercise called financial independence. If I would get divorced today and I'm gonna, let's say, move to the city, or I'll stay in my own home, what do I need in the lump sum right now to walk away and say I'll be living comfortably and never gonna have to worry for the money, right? So that's when you go to this, then you go to this negotiation like, all right, I know the number. Are we gonna get close to it, over it? But you know the number. You're not gonna just go negotiating what? What are you negotiating? What does it mean to be taken care of? Like things that you're saying as a words have to have a tangible meaning, because again, it's a legal and a financial contract.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's answer. There's a question in the chat. Let's answer that before we wrap up a second. So the question has to do with co-parenting schedule, and hold on, I just lost my. Okay, I'm back. Can you hear me okay, Tatiana? Give me a thumbs up.
Yep.
Okay, good. Sorry. So without getting too much extra context, the way I would answer this question that was posed in the chat is, when you're dealing with someone, especially in the narcissistic way, you need to cater all of your settlement to the other person. That narcissist is only seeing what they want. They never take into account the other person's perspective ever. So when you're coming up with settlement options, you always have to basically put yourself in their shoes and either come up with options that you think they will buy into, or you allow them to lead the settlement, right?
even if it means kind of like pandering to that person, letting them feel like they're in the controlling position to come up with a co-parenting plan. So obviously, I don't know how the mediations have gone and what the settlement discussions have been, but if you haven't taken that approach yet, throw it out to him. Let him be the one to tell you what is it that he wants, and you work backwards from there. Instead of being the one to put it out there and seeing if he'll bite, let him be the one to put it to you first. I still believe you probably won't get to trial. Judges really don't like parenting plans. They don't want to tell you what to do with your children, right? And I've seen this happen, Tatiana, a lot with someone, and I'm sure it happens financially as well, when you have a party who is narcissistic. They will take you all the way up until the night before trial, and then they will settle. They will do that as a form of control. And so that may be what your situation ends on. And he may circle back and wind up agreeing to something you spoke about in mediation a long time ago. But unfortunately, when you have a narcissist, you wind up having to play that game. So you always want to craft your settlement options where they will buy in, or you allow them to make the first move. And then you kind of work backwards from there.
So we also have this interesting question. I don't think we can really answer it specifically. What if your spouse tried to intimidate you to commit tax fraud, or you clearly see they're lying on their tax returns? How you can pursue that? The way I would answer this, that's actually something that we should have probably mentioned in our in seminar, is the mediation. Why some people do mediation for the privacy reasons. A lot of times when people have certain businesses that are not declared, and that are not declared in front of, government, perhaps some things that want to be really publicly displayed. So you actually have sort of an advantage knowing that, and you want to stay out of court. You do have a bit of a, I would say, leverage in that situation to try to negotiate something in mediation, right? Because, if it goes to court, then that person is not going to want to.
Yeah, everything's confidential in mediation. So that is your opportunity, especially when you're up against someone who is probably not being forthcoming with finances, maybe hasn't even given over everything that they're supposed to. That's the opportunity for everyone to kind of drop their swords and say, okay, this is private. We can pretty much talk about anything because it cannot be used against us later on down the road. And to put out anything you can possibly think of to reach settlement. So that's why mediation is so important. It's such a huge step of divorce, and why it's really, really critical to prepare for it. And I think, Tatiana, a lot of people, especially with the financial piece of it, they don't properly prepare of all the different ways you can do division. What does 401ks look like? What are tax implications? All these things. They don't put the thought into it ahead of time. So they just show up to mediation and think they're going to settle, but they haven't done the homework. It's like showing up to your final exam without having studied for the test.
Yeah,
You
it's like
don't
I said, you
do
can't
that.
be confused. And going back to this whole tax fraud, you like I said, you have ability to get any information. You can call IRS, you can get a tax transcript, you can get more information that is involved in that. If you are on that paperwork, you have just as much right as your spouse to have access to it. And even like 401k, if you're a beneficiary, you have rights to discuss certain things. Granted, different institutions function differently, but generally you have ability to get some information.
Yeah.
Jenny, anything on your side?
I had one question come over that I think it's a good one for you. And I think this is the one we probably should end on because it's a good takeaway, especially dealing with finances. And that would be, what do you find from the financial lens is the most common financial mistake someone makes during divorce, and how do they avoid that?
So
What's one of the major ones? Because I think that that is a big fearful part of divorce, especially for women who aren't maybe the primary earner, of walking out of this divorce feeling like they got hoodwinked because they didn't understand the finances.
yeah, I would say the first one is really emotions, right? That's the emotions that they wanna, they drive their decisions. They're not emotionally clear. And then they want to settle too quickly. They got that boyfriend and putting their head in the sand. They don't want to think about the real life. And that's
a very impulsive thinking at that time because, you know, boyfriend's gone tomorrow, then you back to your reality. And that's something you're still negotiating. And you need to, if there's children involved, you have responsibilities to the kids as well to do this right. So, you know, really, I think the biggest giant mistake is not understanding the long-term implications of what you are contemplating in the divorce, right? How does that support your agreement? Is this make sense? And that's where I fill in that part because I really want you to know the home, keeping the home, and you're taking more qualified assets that are you can't access till you're 59. It could be very traumatic. And you know, some people just don't want to ask, you know, not asking for help. Like, I'll get this handled, you know, nobody wants to know about my drama. I'll get it done, you know. So I think those are really important things. And but it really all comes down to a strategy. You know, if you don't have a strategy on your divorce, I don't know, you sort of will do it and you kind of feel like, okay, I did it. But when time passes by, you're always going to feel like, did I really give myself the best chance to get the most in the right way? Did I miss something? You know, did I cover my children? Especially if it's a divorce and you never want to speak with each other, you never want to do anything. You know, like education for children, the 529s, like quantify them. What do you need? Even if you're not going to fund them, have an idea how much it costs to put your kids through school. If you have already 529s, whose assets are they? Are they going to still have that custodial that you have no control over and he might just deplete these accounts and take a penalty? Like there's so many nuances that you have to, and that's why it's important to have a strategy and ask the right questions before you sign anything and get people to review your agreement. It's never too late. And once you seal that, then it's done.
That's finality, exactly. It's a good place to end because once the ink is dry, it's dry. And it's very difficult to undo the business side of the divorce. Co-parenting, that can always be modified, but the business side, which is what we really focused on, is pretty much final.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go for modifications and things like that, but you know, a lot of times, like the husbands that don't want to deal with, you know, going back and forth in courts, and maybe they want to start a new business and they are gonna maybe have another, you know, relationship. They are more willing to really do this right first time because they don't want you to revisit that. You know,
Yeah.
granted, if they start better business, they make more money, you can always go after that, but it's again, it's not black and white. There's so much involved in that, and it's never free, never free.
Very true.
So
Very true.
understand your costs before you go into it.
I agree. All right. Well, I think that we've reached our time limit with everybody, and I hope everyone that attended today and watches this on the recording at least took away some really good information and can apply it as soon as possible to their own situation. And please don't be afraid to reach out to myself, Tatiana, as well. We're always here to answer questions, schedule a consultation with you to really dive deeper into your specific situation.
Yes, and I'm just going to share last time our slides, and we are going to conclude on that. And thank you all for being here. Have a good
Thank
night.
you. Thank you for hosting, Tatiana. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.